Hello bookworms, it's Jade from Bedtime Bookworm and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm bringing you another spoilery book diary for part 2 of Oathbringer by Brandon Sanderson. So if you're not familiar with my book diaries, I've been doing these lately for the second half of Rhythm of War and now for all of Oathbringer. Basically, I'm trying to capture my immediate thoughts and reactions as I'm reading the book, so it's a little bit kind of vlog style. I've had a lot of fun putting these together and I know some of you guys have really enjoyed watching them. Goodness. Hi. So this video is covering part 2 of Oathbringer. Each of the Stormlight Archives books is split into 5 different parts, so I'm gonna have a video for each part of Oathbringer. I will link down below my book diary playlist, so if you missed some of my previous videos, you can find them in the playlist. Don't watch this video if you haven't read part 2 of Oathbringer, because this video does contain spoilers, or some people like to watch as they read. I will have timestamps in the description box for each section of the video, so you can just watch the sections of the video that pertain to the chapters that you have already read. I definitely go into some theorizing, and you can really see how hard I'm trying to figure out what Sanderson is trying to tell us. So not everything I say in this video is correct. Please don't correct me in the comment section unless it's something that's like really confirmed in the chapters that I'm covering in this video. I just don't want anybody else to see anything spoilery in the comments. So keep any comments spoilery only for up to this point of Oathbringer. Also, I'm gonna go ahead and warn you guys that there's a few times where I misspeak and I say the wrong characters' names. I promise you I know who the characters are. I'm gonna try to correct them on the screen when I'm editing, but if you hear me say the wrong character's name, you can laugh at me. It was an accident, okay? I know I laughed at myself really hard while I've been editing this video. All right, that's enough of an intro. Let's get into my thoughts on part 2 of Oathbringer. Hey guys, so I have read a little bit more. First, I'll talk about the interludes. Interlude 2, Alista, that took place in a monastery and is about 2 Ardents. I loved that interlude. The female Ardent is like reading a romance novel and is trying to hide it. And at the end, the guy Ardent says that he's read that one and the sequels, and she's like, what? There's a sequel? And he offers to like let her borrow it and stuff, and just as a book lover, that was adorable. And then Interlude 3, apparently Eshonai is dead. I was kind of surprised to read that because she didn't really have like a death scene, which I feel like I would have expected. And so part of me wants to think that like she's not really dead, but they saw her body and her lifeless eyes. Like she seems pretty dead. So that was interesting. Maybe now Venli, Eshonai's sister, is going to be like our main POV from the Warform Parshendi people. There was definitely some interesting things about Spren in this chapter. For one, there's some sort of Spren that like comes up out of Eshonai's body at the very end of the chapter. What is that about? That has got to be important because Sanderson wouldn't just throw that in there for nothing. Also, Venli is talking with, I guess it's one of the Void Spren or something, and they say something interesting. So this Spren, Ulim, mentions having memories and experiences that span eons, something about their leaders knowing what they're doing, and something about the ancestors of the Parshendi. One of the characters says, our ancestors, what did the dead have to do with this? And Ulim says everything, seeing as they're the ones in charge. The dead are in charge? I don't understand what he's talking about. In the next chapter, Jasnah tells Shallan that the way the Fabrials work is by imprisoning Spren, which this has kind of been alluded to a few times, and I was confused. Just the idea that like Stormlight in general is Spren. Maybe I'm still confused about that, but like Eshonai had mentioned trapping Spren in gemstones, and I thought that that was referring to gemstones that have Stormlight. But anyways, apparently Fabrials also work by imprisoning Spren, and Shallan is horrified by this, which I don't blame her. I would be too. Jasnah says something like there are Spren and there are Spren, so like I guess it's kind of like a different kind of Spren, like maybe they're not quite as intelligent or something. And then I loved the next chapter, chapter 34. This is the chapter that Dalinar gets Stormfather to send Fen, the Thaylen Queen, one of his visions, and it was so interesting. One thing I loved about that chapter was seeing what Thaylen really thought of Dalinar. She kind of explains why she had such a hard time trusting him. She talks about how like he's just always been a conqueror, and people are saying that he's gone crazy, and it really like put into perspective why so many of the other rulers have been so adamant against working with Dalinar. And at this point we've been seeing flashbacks from Dalinar and we know how he used to be, so like we kind of understand why the other rulers don't want to work with him. So that was super interesting. And the fact that Fen is kind of coming around and is starting to believe Dalinar, I think is really exciting. Also very interested about the old shard plate, because it seems like you can summon it the way that you would summon a shard blade. And Dalinar mentions that they glow, which is different from like current day shard plate. Another thing that was really interesting in this chapter, so when we first see this vision from Dalinar in, I guess, the Way of Kings, I thought that these creatures he was fighting, these black, oily, slick looking creatures, I thought those were Voidbringers. But now, obviously, I know that they aren't. But he says in this chapter, this left him as much less of a target in the darkness than the other Radiants, who glowed like a brilliant blue beacon, sweeping about himself with the grand shard blade as he fought the Midnight Essence. That sounds a lot like the Midnight Mother, and the way that the creatures are described, I feel like, is the same as the thing that Shallan was fighting earlier. So how are these things related? Is maybe this Midnight Essence, Midnight Mother thing like the big bad? But I think also it's like one of the unmade, and there are 9 unmade, and that has to do with the champion of Odium that Dalinar saw, because he had 9 shadows, one for each of the unmade. Like, I don't even know what any of that means, but I'm starting to kind of connect some pieces. Maybe I'm wrong here, but I did note that Dalinar mentions using a shard blade to fight the Midnight Essence, talking about these like black creatures that I originally thought were Voidbringers. Okay, and then chapter 35 is from Sigzil's point of view, and I'm so glad that in this part of Oathbringer we're getting point of views from different Bridge 4 members. I really like Sigzil. I think he's super interesting. I know it was mentioned before, but he's Azish, but I didn't really have a good concept of what the Azish people were like or what their culture was like. But after having read Edge Dancer, which takes place in that country or involves that country, right? Or maybe it's the interlude from Words of Radiance. Anyways, at this point of my reading experience, I have a better idea of who the Azish are, so I have a better understanding of his culture. It was also really interesting to hear him talk about his previous master, who he refers to as Hoid in this book, and in The Way of Kings, we find out that Wit was Sigzil's master. And so at this point, I mean, I already knew that Wit and Hoid were the same person, but if you hadn't yet, I think this is where you're supposed to kind of put that together, although those are like really small details that would be easy to miss. But I find it really interesting that he talked about Hoid in here. What I don't know is, so Kaladin technically knows that Wit was Sigzil's master because Wit told him in The Way of Kings, but I don't know if Sigzil knows that Wit is around. I don't know if he's around right this minute, but I don't know if he knows that his master was the Wit to the king. So I'm very interested to see when he's going to find that out. Other than that, I didn't love this chapter. It was a lot of Sigzil asking Kaladin like really organizational kinds of questions that I thought were kind of meant to add to the world building, like logistical things that I didn't really care about. But it was interesting to see what Kaladin thought of those questions and to see what Sigzil, like his view on Kaladin and how he feels towards him. Oh, and there was also a character, I think an Ardent, or a woman who Kaladin asked to join the Windrunners to be his scribe, and she like doesn't like that idea, because at first she was like really excited to be one of the Windrunners, and then she finds out it's just to be a scribe, and she's like, I'm gonna pass. Then Kaladin's like stumbling over his words and like, well, I'm gonna make a test so people can try out, so you can try out if you want to. I hope that she like aces this test and makes an awesome Windrunner, because that'll be really cool. Okay, and then 36 is the last chapter that I have finished so far. It's a Dalinar flashback. Really interesting to see his wife Evie, especially because she mentions the old magic, the Night Watcher, which Dalinar is like, you know, don't talk about that, that's like heresy, which is really interesting because we know that Dalinar goes to the Night Watcher and uses the old magic or whatever. But also, we learn in this chapter that a while ago, whenever Dalinar got Oathbringer, that fight that he didn't kill the little boy. It did kind of like blackout scene at the end, and I just kind of assumed that he had killed the little boy, but he didn't. That made me really happy that he didn't kill the little boy. And it's really cute because Evie, his wife, is like so proud of him, and he is actually like happy that he's done something to make Evie proud. But there's that little glimmer of Dalinar that I love so much. I was so happy when we found out that he didn't actually murder that child. All right, guys, that's it so far. I will check in with you guys when I've read some more stuff. Hey guys, I'm here to do another update. I've read quite a bit since my last update. I think I left off at chapter 36. I am now on chapter 42. So a few things to update you guys on, but I've been reading really late at night and in bed and just not feeling like pulling out the camera. Also, this time around, unlike when I did my Words of Radiance clips, I've been trying to actually use my nice camera instead of my phone camera. So that's been a bit of a deterrent as well. So chapter 37 was so fun because it was from Rock's point of view, and I freaking love Rock. He's just hilarious. And in this chapter, he gets to see his family. They like came from wherever he's from, and I loved that little reunion scene. Also, Hobber healed himself in this. He got his legs back. That was such an exciting moment. Then we have a chapter where Dalinar is experiencing one of his visions, and this time he brings along Yasna and Navani, and that was really cool because they're both, you know, like scholars, and they were like dissecting the vision, and I had a lot of fun reading like their insights, like the part where Yasna figures out that these visions have kind of proven that the desolations were so bad in the past that they like lost technology and kind of regressed. So there's definitely a lot of information revealed in this chapter. So Stormfather is talking with Dalinar. I felt like this chapter and another one I read and I feel like I understood some of it, but I still felt like a lot of it went over my head. So in this chapter, Stormfather explains about the heralds and how the desolations, if I'm interpreting it correctly, the desolations are like held at bay when the heralds go to damnation and are being tortured, but if they break, like when they're being tortured, that's when the Voidbringers return, and that the last time after a desolation, they basically like tricked or just sent one of the heralds, the one who had never broken before, to damnation alone. And I don't know where the other heralds are. Like, it sounded like they are on Roshar with everybody else. It says, the 9 realized that one of them had never broken. Each of the others at some point had been the one to give in, to start the desolation to escape the pain. They determined that perhaps they didn't all need to return. They decided to stay here, risking an internal desolation, but hoping that the one they left in damnation would alone be enough to hold it all together. The one who wasn't meant to have joined them in the first place, the one who was not a king, scholar, or general. Talonot, Dalinar said, the bearer of agonies, the one abandoned in damnation, left to withstand the torturers alone. So Talonot was, I'm pretty sure, the herald that shows up at the end of The Way of Kings, which makes sense now that we know what happened. He, I guess, finally broke, and that's why a desolation is starting. It says he was tortured for 4,500 years. That's crazy to think about. Also in this chapter they talk about the Voidbringers, and I don't totally understand this part, but something about like the Voidbringers being reincarnations of Voidbringers from the past, like they never die or something. I don't totally understand that, but I think that the Parshmen who turn into the Voidbringers that were like totally transformed are being taken over by the spirit of the ancestors of the Parshmen or something. In the next chapter, there's a meeting between like all of the important people, and some of the interactions between Yasna and Kaladin were hilarious. I don't think they like each other very much. They seemed a little snarky. At least Yasna seemed snarky, but I loved it. And Shallan gets caught doodling a picture of Kaladin's face, which I thought was hilarious and I loved. And also Shallan is keeping Vale and all of that, like, you know, what she knows about the Ghostbloods a secret from Yasna, and I don't love that. I wish she would just tell Yasna, but that's how I always am when I read books. I don't like people keeping secrets. I just want people to be friends and tell each other everything. But then the story would be a lot less interesting. And then at the end of that chapter / the beginning of the next one, Shallan gets a letter from the Ghostbloods explaining what happened to her brother, which was very interesting. I did think that the stuff felt a little info dumpy, but I didn't mind it. I feel like I still don't totally understand this either. So we learn that there are at least 2 major institutions in Roshar, other than the Ghostbloods, which presaged the return of the Voidbringers and the Desolations. So we have the Ghostbloods as one, and then the Sons of Honor, which I remember that Stormfather keeps calling Dalinar Son of Honor, but I don't think that Dalinar is actually part of a group. But apparently Gavilar and Amaram were part of the Sons of Honor. And they were actually trying to bring on the Desolations because they thought that by bringing on the Desolations, it would force the Heralds to show up, which was something that I had been speculating about. I actually just posted my last Words of Radiance book diary, and in that book diary, I speculate a lot about people wanting to bring on the Desolations. So I wasn't totally crazy. There definitely were people who wanted to bring on the Desolations, including Gavilar and Amaram, and I guess they were working together. And then a second group who knew the Desolations might return are the Skybreakers, which I don't think I've heard that term yet. Led by the ancient herald Nolan Aelin, often simply called Nail, who we did meet at the end of Words of Radiance, and also he was an Edge Dancer, so I have a vague idea of who he is. So he's the guy who revives Seth somehow at the end of Words of Radiance and gives Seth a black shard blade, I believe. And also he's the one who's been chasing Lift. So the Skybreakers, or Nail, believed that men speaking the words of other orders would hasten the return of Voidbringers. So he actually has been trying to kill people who have been manifesting powers, because he thinks that if people bond with Spren and have radiant powers, that's going to bring on the Desolation. And apparently Shallan's brother, Helleram, was working with Nail, or was a Skybreaker. I definitely did not see that coming. The letter said, your mother had intimate contact with a Skybreaker acolyte, and you know the result of that relationship. So was that Skybreaker acolyte the guy that was supposedly like her mom's lover that also was killed whenever Shallan was defending herself? And it says, Nail may also have learned through means we do not understand that a member of your house was close to bonding a Spren. That's gotta be Yasna, right? But I'm kind of confused why it was written that way in the letter, because presumably, like, the Ghostbloods know that Shallan is a Radiant, so why wouldn't they guess that she was the person in the family that was close to bonding a Spren? Anyways, all of that political world building stuff was really interesting. I'm not sure I get all of the details yet, but that's okay. Then in chapter 41, we see from Tef's point of view, and apparently he's like a drug addict or something, and that made me really sad. And then the next chapter, chapter 42, is from Dalinar's point of view, and he is bringing a vision to the king or whatever emperor of Aesir, who was in Edge Dancer and also Lift's interlude in Words of Radiance. And I really enjoyed this chapter. Lift shows up, and that was so much fun, and she says that Dalinar has a nice looking butt, which I was like cracking up laughing at. And Stormfather is like really confused at first that Lift is in his vision because he doesn't think she should be able to. And Stormfather says, that woman, this is a creation specifically meant to defy my will. That child is tainted by the Nightwalker. We know that Lift went to see the Nightwalker and thinks that she has stopped aging because of what she got from the Nightwalker, and also the fact that there's something special about Lift because she can actually metabolize food into Stormlight. So there's definitely some interesting stuff going on there that we don't quite understand. And then the last chapter that I read last night was chapter 43, and it was from Moash's point of view, which I was very interested in because I had no idea what Moash was up to. So he's still kind of like on the run with Graves, and apparently he's feeling a little bit bad about betraying his friends, and I'm glad that he's feeling bad about this. But then they get attacked by Voidbringers, and Graves is killed. I was not expecting that. That happened really fast, and I thought he was going to be an important character, so that was surprising. And basically, Moash is captured by them, and they fly away with him at the end of that chapter, so I'm a little bit nervous about that. I mean, I have mixed feelings about Moash. I obviously don't love that he betrayed Bridge 4 in the last book, but I'm also understanding of why, and I'm interested to see if he's going to redeem himself, and now I'm like worried about him because he's been captured by the Voidbringers. Oh, and I almost forgot, but at the end of that chapter, he gives them his shard blade, I think in exchange for his life. So now he doesn't have a shard blade anymore, which makes me a little sad, I guess. Anyways, that is all I have for you now. I have quite a bit of Oathbringer reading to do, so I'm going to get to it. Bye. Hey guys, so I read a little bit more last night. Chapter 45 is from Moash's point of view, so it seems like we're getting more of a storyline from Moash, and I'm kind of excited because I've heard people say that he gets too much hate and that he's not so bad. And I'm thinking that he might be having a bit of a redemption arc in this book, and I'm actually kind of excited about it. I don't remember what I was doing last night. It's probably in some Discord server, and somebody said that Moash is like Kelsier from the Mistborn series, and I found that really intriguing. I can definitely see the parallels there, and so I'm really excited to see what Moash does. But I think I said in my last clip that he got taken away by the Voidbringers, and it looks like the Voidbringers have enslaved some humans, but they're doing things a little bit differently because they're letting humans actually like pick the tasks that they do, but they're still slaves. I thought that was really interesting, and definitely looking forward to seeing where his storyline goes. And then chapter 46, I was listening to this one when I was in the car, I was driving, so I couldn't stop and react to it, but it is from Scar's point of view, and he is one of the bridgemen that I'm not like super familiar with. He's kind of just like been in the background for me, but I really liked him in this chapter. He has kind of resigned himself to not being able to take in Stormlight like some of the other bridgemen have been able to figure out, and he is talking with Ristina, who I think is the same woman that was in a previous chapter who wanted to be a Windfinder, but if it's not the same woman, it's another woman who wants to be, I said Windfinder, that's a Wheel of Time reference, Windrunner, and basically he like gets her to be able to take in Stormlight for the first time. He like coaches her through it, and he's kind of resigned to the fact that he can't do it himself, but that he's able to help other people to figure it out. And then at the end of the chapter, he does it. And honestly, this chapter almost made me cry. Let me see if I can find why. Oh, I remember. He was telling the girl, Ristina, about the first time he saw Kaladin use his powers, or maybe it's even like the first time Kaladin ever used his powers in the first place, but it was when they were on a bridge run and he was in the front and he thought he was going to die, and Kaladin draws all the arrows to himself and saves the rest of the bridgemen. And when he was talking about that, I got teary-eyed. It was so sweet. And I got chills when I was reading about that scene and just like remembering when it happened in the Way of Kings, because that was like a really awesome scene. But yeah, when Scar finally like was able to take in the Stormlight, he didn't even know it at first. Rock pointed it out to him, and I almost cried, and I was driving, and it was so good. Chapter 47 is from Yasna's point of view. We haven't had a chapter from Yasna's point of view since like the Way of Kings, I swear. At least I don't remember. And I love being in her head, and this is, actually, did we even get one before in the Way of Kings? I think we did. But in this chapter, we actually see her spren and like get to know him or it a little bit better. And I thought that her spren was super interesting. Yasna says to Ivory something along the lines of like, we have to tell everybody what Wit told us. And I don't know what she's talking about. I don't think we know, because I mean, I do remember her having a conversation with Wit when she returned from Shadesmar at the end of Words of Radiance, but it was just like a comedic exchange is what I remember. I don't remember him saying anything that seemed like really important. So very curious to know what that is, but her spren, Ivory, doesn't want her to tell people because it thinks that it's going to cause problems. I also thought it was really interesting hearing more about some of the politics and dynamics between different kinds of spren. So Ivory is talking about how Shallan's spren is a cryptic, which we've heard of before, and how you can't like trust them and like they're not good because they like lies or whatever. And I know that Honor spren also don't like cryptics. So it sounds like, I don't remember if we were told what kind of spren Ivory is, but that kind of spren also doesn't like cryptics, apparently. And then I thought this was an interesting sentence. Ivory says, one does not war with cryptics as one does with Honor spren. Although, that's weird. I was listening to that on audiobook, and Honor spren isn't capitalized, but cryptics are. It's interesting. Oh, it says Ivory was an ink spren, and that one's not capitalized either. Why is cryptics capitalized, but not the other two kinds? And I guess there's 10 different kinds, one for each order, which I don't know if I really knew before. And then the ending of this chapter, something I thought was interesting, Jasnah says 10 orders all ended in death. And Ivory says all but one, they lived in death instead. And I think they're talking about Nail's order of Radiance, or he's a herald. There's just so much I don't understand. Oh, and this is where Jasnah says, we must tell the others what we learned from Wit, Ivory. Eventually, the secret must be known. And then Ivory says, Jasnah, no, it would be the end, another recreance. And she said, the truth has not destroyed me. Anyways, I don't know what truth they're talking about. I don't think we're supposed to know yet, but I'm very intrigued by that. Okay, I've got some more reading to do. I'll be back. Okay, I just finished chapter 53. It was a Jasnah chapter, and I love her. I love seeing from her point of view. She's so interesting. But in this chapter, Amaram comes to her and tries to speak with her privately, and she kind of tells him off. And it was such a good scene. I just had a big grin on my face. But also, I don't know if we already knew this. I don't remember hearing this before. It was probably mentioned though. But I guess Dalinar had tried to get them to be in a relationship or something, because Amaram says, we used to be close, and Jasnah replies saying that her father, or I guess it was, her father's not Dalinar, Elhokar wanted them to be close. So I guess they, were supposed to get married at some point, but obviously, that didn't work out, and now I need to know the details. What happened? And how close were they? Did she ever like Amaram? Or has she always not liked him? I don't know. I'm so intrigued. But also at the end of this chapter, Renarin finds these jewels that are cut a certain way behind these tiles. And basically they figure out that even though the books in the library had decayed, that the people in the past were, I don't know if they were the Radiants. Yeah, it says ancient Radiants. They'd found another way to preserve their knowledge in these gems. Basically, I guess you put Stormlight into them, and as the Stormlight leaves, it makes a sound, like a buzzing sound in a pattern that can be translated into words, I guess. And that just sounds really cool. That's a pretty cool discovery. But there was a flashback, a Dalinar flashback, obviously. And it was so cute seeing him, how he was when Adolin was born. We see him when he meets Renarin for the first time. And it's just really interesting to see Dalinar and how he is adjusting to being a dad and everything. Okay, I only have a few more chapters to the end of part 2, and I am ready for something exciting to happen. I feel like something pretty exciting happens at the end of each, part. So fingers crossed that something exciting happens. Okay, chapter 54 was from Moash's point of view, and that was really interesting, and now I'm doubting that he's gonna get a redemption arc. It almost sounds like he is, joining the Voidbringers. I mean, obviously he's with the Voidbringers, but actually, joining their side. He thinks the Voidbringers are on the right side, and he even said something about how, in his head, that Kaladin was still protecting a murderer when he was protecting Elhokar. So I might not be getting that redemption arc that I was hoping for. And now Moash is gonna teach the Parshmen how to fight. I'm sad about that. I just finished chapter 55, and it was from Relane's point of view, and I feel so bad for him. It was kind of like a feel-good chapter at the same time. Like, I don't know, it made me a little bit sad, but also feel good because it was like a bonding chapter with all of the Bridge 4 people and, you know, people admitting that they feel alone, and Rock's like, let's feel alone together. But I thought it was really interesting the way this chapter kind of examines sort of like racism and things in Roshar, and how Relane likes the rest of Bridge 4 because they try to be his friend, but that, you know, they aren't perfect and they definitely still have some prejudices against him and things like that. And then at the end, Kaladin sits down and tells him, like, I know how you feel, and Relane says, do you really, or are you just saying that? And Kaladin is like, I guess I don't. Why don't you tell me how you feel? It was such a good chapter. Okay, I just finished part 2, so I just read chapters 56 and 57. Dalinar is in vision. He, again, has Gox, the Emperor of the Azish. And after Gox leaves, Odium shows up in the vision. That was kind of crazy, and they have a really interesting conversation. Odium talks about how there were basically 3 gods. Honor was one of them, and Honor is dead. And that the other one is cultivation. And I think Odium is hinting at the fact that cultivation and, was it the Night Watcher, the old god that Dalinar went to have his memory erased? I think Odium was saying that that was the same person, or like the, I don't know if I would call it a person, but that they were the same being, which was very interesting. And then at the very end of part 2, Lix shows up, and she tells Dalinar that she agrees to bring Gox to him in Urithiru. So I'm really excited that that Dalinar is going to meet Lift in real life. And I don't think I was really expecting her to be in this book so much. I mean, she hasn't been in here a lot, but this is at least the second or third time that we've seen her, and it sounds like we're going to see her some more. So very excited about that. It wasn't like a crazy ending to that part, but it was a little bit crazy to see Odium, and I'm very intrigued about some of the things that he said, because I still don't really understand all of the different gods that are in this world and everything. So anyways, I'm going to keep reading, and I will check in with you later. Alright guys, there you have it. Hopefully you really enjoyed this video. I know I really enjoyed putting it together. I always like to talk about what my favorite scenes were at the end of these, and looking back on this section, I can't say that I had like a particularly favorite scene that stands out. I do think the pacing in this section was a little bit slower, but I think my favorite parts of it were some of the world building reveals that we got, like learning more about the heralds and the desolations and the history behind all of that. Shallan getting that letter from the Ghostbloods, from Reyes, explaining the different factions, because I, previous to this, I'd kind of been figuring it out, but I was also still confused about who all the factions were and what they really believed. So that letter was really helpful, and like learning that Helloran was one of the Skybreakers was like really interesting. But just all of the world building stuff and explanations that we get, or even just like me starting to piece together some of the clues, which you saw a lot of in this video, that was kind of my favorite part. I don't have a particular scene. Anyways, let me know down in the comment section what you thought of part 2 of Oathbringer. Did you have a favorite scene? Did you enjoy the world building things like I did? Let me know what you thought, and keep an eye out for my part 3 video coming out hopefully in the next week or 2. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel for more bookish content. That is all I have for now. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, bookworms, keep reading. Bye.